February 18th, 1943, 4:30 p.m. The desert wind does not howl, it hisses. It cuts through the canvas of the command tent near the Tunisian border, carrying the fine, abrasive dust that settles into every crease of a uniform and every gear of a tank. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel sits at a makeshift desk, the wooden surface covered in maps and a thin layer of grit. He is tired. The exhaustion in his eyes is not just physical. It is the deep, cellular fatigue of a man who has been fighting a war of movement across endless sand for 2 years. Outside, the sounds of the Afrika Korps are celebratory. Men are laughing, stripping down engines and boiling water for coffee. They are victors. They have just smashed the American lines at Kasserine Pass, and the mood is electric. But inside the tent, the silence is heavy. Rommel dips his pen and continues a letter to his wife, Lucy. He is not celebrating. He is analyzing. He writes with the cold precision of a surgeon dissecting a failed procedure. His assessment of the American forces he has just faced is brutal in its honesty. To him, the Americans are soft. They are amateurs playing a professional's game. He describes an army that lacks the killer instinct, led by officers who make mistakes so fundamental that in the German Wehrmacht they would be court-martialed before the sun went down. Rommel has just watched the United States Army, the force that was supposed to turn the tide of the war, break and run. It wasn't a retreat, it was a collapse. Over 6,000 American casualties in 6 days. Entire battalions surrendering their weapons. The desert floor at Kasserine is currently littered with burning jeeps, abandoned half-tracks, and stockpiles of rations that the retreating GIs didn't even bother to destroy. To Rommel, this looks familiar. It looks like France in 1940. It looks like an army that has no business being on a modern battlefield. He tells Lucy that the soldiers he fought were bewildered. These young men, raised on stories of victory from the First World War, arrived in North Africa thinking war was an adventure. Kasserine Pass taught them it was a slaughterhouse. Rommel believes he is witnessing the psychological disintegration of the American spirit. The premise is simple. The Americans are rich in equipment, but poor in warrior culture. They have the trucks, the gasoline, and the food, but they lack the steel in the spine. He finishes the letter with a strategic calculation that will shape the next month of the war. If Germany can launch another hammer blow within weeks, they can push this disorganized mob into the Mediterranean Sea before they ever learn how to fight. The report goes to Berlin with the highest priority. The message is clear. Exploit the American weakness now. Do not give them a moment to breathe. This is not a judgment born of arrogance. It is a judgment born of data. At Kasserine, the American failures were systemic. Rommel's intelligence officers noted that U.S. commanders positioned their units in low ground, surrendering the high ground to the enemy, a rookie mistake. Their radio discipline was non-existent. Under fire, the airwaves filled with panicked shouting rather than coded coordinates. There was no coordination between the tanks and the infantry.
When the panzers rolled forward, the American infantry retreated without orders, leaving the tanks blind and vulnerable. It was a cascade of failure, one domino knocking down the next until the entire front line disintegrated.
The man responsible for this disaster, Major General Lloyd Fredendall, is the subject of intense German study. Intelligence reports detail his command style with mocking fascination. Fredendall built his headquarters in a canyon 70 miles behind the front lines, so far back that he couldn't hear the artillery. He tried to fight a modern mobile war, using radios and telephones, looking at maps instead of the terrain. His orders were confused, contradictory, and slow. To the German High Command, this is the fatal flaw of the American military. They treat war like a corporation, not a conflict. They have adequate equipment, and the soldiers are personally brave when cornered, but the command structure is amateur hour. They are learning warfare in real time against the masters of the craft, and the tuition is being paid in blood. Rommel does the math. He calculates the learning curve of a standard army. It takes years to build a competent officer corps. It takes months to train a unit to move as one. Based on the disaster at Kasserine, Rommel estimates it will take the Americans at least 6 months to fix their leadership issues. It will take probably 12 months to develop a doctrine that can actually challenge the German blitzkrieg. The window of opportunity is wide open. If the Africa Corps strikes again in March, the result will be a carbon copy of February. The Americans will panic, they will break, and they will run. This is the logic of 1943. The Germans have the experience, the tactics, and the momentum. The Americans have fear and confusion. The German doctrine of armored warfare is a proven formula. It has worked against every nation they have faced since 1939. The strategy is simple. Concentrate overwhelming force at a single weak point. Punch a hole in the line with heavy armor. Drive fast mobile units through that hole and fan out behind the enemy. Sever their supply lines, cut their communications, and force them to retreat or surrender. This is the sledgehammer that broke France in 6 weeks. It destroyed the Soviet armies in the summer of 1941. It pushed the British back across the sands of North Africa twice. It works because most armies fight defensively. They draw a line in the sand and wait to be hit. Kasserine proved that the Americans fight exactly this way. They dig holes and wait. And when the panzers concentrate on a weak sector, the Americans retreat rather than counterattack. Rommel turns his eyes to the map of central Tunisia. His finger traces the contour lines around a place called El Guettar. The terrain is rugged, a mix of jagged hills and open valley floors, perfect for an ambush, but also perfect for a demonstration of armored superiority. If German forces attack there in late March, they will catch the Americans while they are still licking their wounds from Kasserine. The psychological advantage alone will be decisive. Berlin approves the assessment immediately. One more offensive to break the American morale completely. Then, Germany can shift its elite units to face the British Eighth Army, while the Americans spend the next year shipping their defeated army back to New York. It is a sound plan. It relies on the assumption that an army cannot change its nature in 3 weeks.
March 6, 1943, 10 a.m. While the Germans plan their victory lap, a cloud of dust appears on the horizon, heading toward the headquarters of the U.S. Second Corps. The silence of the desert is shattered by the wail of sirens. This is not a stealthy approach. It is a declaration. A motorcade of scout cars and jeeps roars into the compound, flags snapping in the wind. Standing in the lead vehicle, dust coating his face but failing to dim the polish on his helmet, is Lieutenant General George S. Patton, Jr. He has arrived to take command of the broken corps that fell apart at Kasserine. The atmosphere shifts the moment his boots hit the sand. He wears ivory-handled revolvers on his hips. His uniform is pressed. He looks like he's attending a parade, not a war. Patton does not convene a committee. He does not ask for opinions. He issues an ultimatum. The days of the soft American are over. He looks around at the unshaven, disheveled soldiers, men who look like refugees rather than warriors, and he explodes. He orders that every man, from the cooks to the colonels, must wear a tie and a regulation steel helmet at all times. In the sweltering heat of the North African desert, this seems like insanity. But Patton isn't interested in fashion. He is interested in psychology. He knows these men feel defeated. By forcing them to look like soldiers, by forcing them to shave and salute and stand tall, he is reminding them that they are professionals.
The discipline is immediate and brutal. Officers who show up to briefings with unbuttoned collars are fined hundreds of dollars on the spot. Soldiers who fail to salute the general's car are reprimanded publicly. Patton tears through the headquarters like a whirlwind. He fires the officers who hesitate. He promotes the men who show aggression. He tells them that there is no such thing as a defensive position. He tells them that digging a foxhole is just digging a grave. The only direction is forward. The only improved position is the enemy's position. This is a cultural revolution disguised as a command change. But across the lines, the German intelligence officers watching this shake-up are unimpressed. One general cannot fix a broken system in 3 weeks. That is the consensus in the German High Command. They see Patton's arrival as a desperate attempt to boost morale with theatrics. Sure, he might make them salute sharper. He might make them wear ties in the heat. But he cannot teach an entire Army Corps how to coordinate artillery, infantry, and armor in 20 days. Complex military doctrine takes months to drill into soldiers. You cannot undo the humiliation of Kasserine with a siren and a shiny helmet. Rommel, whose health is now failing him, reviews the attack plan for Guettar one last time. His stomach ailments are severe. He is exhausted and yellow with jaundice. He hands operational command over to General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim, confident that the plan is solid. The plan assumes American hesitation.
It assumes that when the German tanks appear, the Americans will freeze. It assumes that the coordination between American units will be slow and clumsy. Every single one of these assumptions is logical. They are based on hard evidence from every battle the Germans have fought. On March 22, 1943, the German forces move into their assembly areas near El Guettar. The order of battle is formidable. It includes the 10th Panzer Division, battle-hardened veterans equipped with the Mark IV tank. It includes the Italian Centauro Division, experienced desert fighters. They are a shark moving into waters filled with minnows. German commanders brief their tank crews. The instructions are routine. The Americans will be in fixed positions. When we concentrate our armor, they will try to call for air support, but it will be late. If we keep the pressure up, they will retreat just like they did at Kasserine. The technical mismatch is significant. The German 75mm main guns can punch through the armor of an American Sherman tank from 2,000 yards away, over a mile. The Sherman's gun needs to get within 500 yards to hope for a kill. In the open desert, that range advantage is a death sentence. The German artillery has prepared fire plans to suppress the American infantry. The entire operation is a machine built to exploit the flaws of an amateur enemy. March 23, 1943, 5:45 a.m. Dawn breaks over El Guettar. The sky turns a bruised purple, then a bleeding orange. The air is cool, but the heat has already risen from the stones. German engines cough to life, a low rumble that vibrates through the ground. The attack begins at 6 a.m. sharp. Lead elements of the 10th Panzer Division roll forward, tracks clanking, dust billowing behind them. They are moving toward positions held by the U.S. 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. Visibility is perfect. The terrain is exactly as mapped. Everything is proceeding according to the operational plan. The German commanders watch through their binoculars, waiting for the Americans to break. Then the sky tears open. It is not the scattered, ranging shots of nervous artillery crews. It is a thunderclap of coordinated violence. American artillery opens fire with a technique the Germans have never encountered before. It is called time on target, a terrifying mathematical equation applied to warfare. Every gun in the Second Corps, hundreds of cannons of different calibers located at different distances, has calculated the flight time of their shells so that every single projectile lands on the German position at the exact same second. One moment, there is silence. The next moment, the entire grid square occupied by the lead German tanks erupts. The ground simply ceases to exist. It is churned into a storm of shrapnel, high explosives, and concussive force. This level of coordination is shocking. The German army relies heavily on horse-drawn artillery and decentralized command. They cannot replicate this. They cannot pick up a radio and bring down the wrath of God on a single acre of land instantly.
The accuracy is surgical. The volume is industrial. German tanks take direct hits on their top armor. Radio operators in the command tracks are screaming, their voices drowned out by the ceaseless hammering of American shells.
But the 10th Panzer Division is a veteran unit. They do not panic easily. They keep advancing, buttoning up their hatches, driving through the wall of fire. This is expected resistance, they tell themselves. The Americans are throwing a tantrum, but they will break under sustained pressure. The German commanders order their units to push through the artillery zone and close the distance. They need to get within direct fire range of the American lines. As they emerge from the smoke, they scan for the American tanks, looking for the easy kills. Instead, they find a trap. American tank destroyers open fire from concealed positions in the wadis and ravines. These aren't tanks sitting out in the open like ducks. They are mobile guns, hidden, waiting. The German Mark IVs start taking hits from the flanks. The Americans have not positioned themselves in a straight line. They have set up a kill zone, arranging their anti-tank weapons to create a crossfire. No matter which way a German tank turns, it exposes its thinner side armor to an American gun. By 9 a.m., the German forces have pushed 2,000 yards into the American lines. In a normal battle, this would be the breakthrough. But the Americans are not retreating. For the men of the Big Red One, Guettar is not just a battle. It is an exorcism. Many of these men were there at Kasserine. They remember the shame. They remember the feeling of running away. Today, under the watchful, terrifying eye of George Patton, they are not looking for the exit. They are looking at their sights. They have traded their fear for a cold, professional rage. German radio intercepts pick up the American voice traffic. It is confusing to the German translators. There is no panic. The voices are flat, calm, almost bored. Officers are calling out coordinates. Sergeants are adjusting fields of fire. This is not the sound of a collapsing army. The American infantry holds its ground, even as the panzers roll within yards of their foxholes. When the pressure becomes too great, they do not rout. They execute a fighting withdrawal. They move back to prepared secondary positions, turn around, and start shooting again. They are making the Germans pay for every foot of sand with blood and oil. The Italian Centauro division on the German right flank runs into a wall of lead. American machine gunners have set up overlapping fields of fire that create an impenetrable barrier. The Italian infantry is pinned down, unable to move, while American mortars rain down on them with terrifying accuracy. By noon, the German advance has stalled at 3,000 yards. The momentum is gone. The battlefield is littered with burning German tanks, their black smoke twisting into the clear blue sky. General von Arnim, sitting in his headquarters, stares at the reports coming in. This is not the battle he planned. This is not the enemy he was promised. The casualties are mounting rapidly, and there is no sign of an American collapse. He studies the tactical maps with growing concern. The Shermans are still technically inferior. The terrain is still the same.
But the ghost in the machine has changed. The Americans are fighting with a coordination and aggression that suggests they have been doing this for a decade. March 24th, 1943. Von Arnim makes the call. He recommends suspending the offensive. The German forces are bleeding out. The Americans are too strong, too dug in, and their artillery is too devastating. The attack is called off. The German units reverse their engines and withdraw, leaving the hulks of their destroyed machines behind. In the silence that follows, German intelligence officers scramble to understand what happened. They interview captured American soldiers. They sift through documents found on the field. They are looking for the secret weapon. Did the Americans get new tanks? No. Did they get reinforcements from a veteran British unit? No.
The transformation happened in the mind. It happened in 21 days under Patton. His method was simple but radical. First, a purge. He removed the cancer of hesitation. Second, a revolution in doctrine. Every unit learned that defense is just a prelude to an attack. Third, a psychological shift. Patton convinced these men they were the best soldiers in the world, and he did it by treating them like the best. The entire Second Corps learned one simple lesson. Attack succeeds, hesitation fails. German commanders analyze the Battle of Guettar and realize the implications. The Americans have adopted a doctrine that neutralizes German advantages. The Germans rely on individual tank aces and tactical brilliance. The Americans respond with a system. They respond with the industrial might of a nation that can manufacture artillery shells faster than the Germans can manufacture bullets. It is a mechanical symphony of violence. For the German infantryman on the ground, it feels like the universe has turned against him. He isn't fighting a man, he is fighting a grid coordinate. Rommel had warned them. Before he left for Germany on sick leave on March 9th, he wrote updated assessments. He warned that the Americans were learning faster than any opponent Germany had ever faced. He warned that under new leadership, they were becoming dangerous. But Rommel was back in Europe when his warnings came true. The attack at Guettar confirmed his worst fears. The Americans didn't just fix their problems, they evolved. May 13th, 1943. The end comes quickly. German forces in Tunisia surrender. It is a staggering defeat. Over 250,000 Axis prisoners are taken. The North African campaign is over. In less than 90 days, the U.S. Army has gone from the humiliation of Kasserine Pass to the total victory of Tunisia. German commanders in prisoner-of-war camps sit and discuss what went wrong. They issue new tactical guidance for the defense of Europe. They warn that the Americans are aggressive, mobile, and backed by logistics that seem impossible. When Allied forces land in Sicily in July 1943, those warnings are proven right again. Patton's 7th Army races across the island, moving faster than the Germans thought possible, beating the British to the city of Messina.
The German defenders report that American tactical aggression makes defensive operations a nightmare. They cannot rest. They cannot regroup. The Americans just keep coming. June 1944. Rommel is now in France, commanding the defenses of the Atlantic Wall. He knows the invasion is coming. He deploys his forces specifically to counter the American style of war. He positions his mobile reserves close to the beaches because he knows that once the Americans get a foothold, they will push inland with terrifying speed. His assessment of the American soldier has completely reversed. He no longer mocks them. He writes that they are very much more advanced in their tactical thinking than the British. He respects them. He fears them. When D-Day arrives on June 6, 1944, Rommel's hands are tied by Hitler's refusal to release the Panzer reserves. But his prediction holds true. At Omaha and Utah beaches, the Americans take heavy casualties, but they do not stop. They push inland. They are professional. They are lethal. They are the force that Rommel saw being born in the dust of El Guettar. Flash forward to 1945. The war is over. In interrogation rooms across Germany, Allied officers sit across from defeated German generals. The transcripts of these conversations read like confessions. Men like Hasso von Manteuffel and Field Marshal Albert Kesselring speak with a begrudging, startled respect. They admit that they underestimated the enemy. They expected the Americans to be like the early Soviets, slow, clumsy, easy to demoralize. Instead, they found an opponent that evolved at a speed that felt unfair. General von Manteuffel states for the record that the Americans learned faster than any army in history. They didn't make the same mistake twice. Field Marshal Kesselring testifies that American artillery coordination was the most effective thing he encountered in 6 years of global war. The speed with which Americans could bring destruction down on a target made the German tactical doctrine obsolete. They didn't just lose the war, they lost their sense of professional superiority. The consensus is clear. The American Army of 1945 was a different species than the Army of early 1943. The same force that collapsed at Kasserine Pass became the most effective fighting machine the world had ever seen. Rommel's initial assessment was logical. Armies shouldn't be able to change that fast. But Patton proved him wrong in 3 weeks. The 90 days between the shame of the desert defeat and the triumph in Tunisia changed the course of the 20th century. It was the moment the arsenal of democracy stopped just building weapons and started knowing how to use them. German generals stopped underestimating the American soldier because by May 1943 they realized the man across the foxhole wasn't a tourist. He was the architect of their inevitable defeat. The silence that follows in the interrogation room is the silence of men who know they were beaten, not just by metal, but by a mindset.